Hey everyone, Dante here again. So this will be a continuation on the topic of narcissism and codependency that first came up in a recent video about how to identify the trappings of a narcissist, particularly spiritual narcissists, which tend to be the more vulnerable types of narcissists. So this video is more about why we might be attracted to these people or why we continue to attract these people as a corresponding energy type. So I will first say that the last video is maybe the most important part in recognizing this person is this way, and regardless of what's up with me, the next step I need to take is creating distance and space from this person and basically cutting them out of my life. Because, as I've said already, you can't help them. There's very little that will help them, even if they're willing to be helped. And in addition to this, the more time you spend under the illusion that you're going to help them, the more time that you're going to make yourself vulnerable to being hurt. So, why is somebody a match to a narcissist? Why do you attract this situation? Because most people who end up in this situation will feel like it's something familiar and feel like it's something that they've experienced earlier in their lives. Sometimes that comes from something you experienced in childhood, and sometimes you only got a certain kind of conditioning that made you a match to a narcissist. The match to a narcissist is known as somebody who is codependent. And codependents and narcissists have a similar sense of a lack of worth and value. Now, the narcissist compensates that for building up their sense of self to this grandiose level where they are almost superhuman. And they need other people to validate this story that they're telling themselves. I've talked about that a lot in the last video. The codependent, however, doesn't feel like they are valuable, but they extract a sense of value by being a good person, by being a nice person, and by doing what it takes for others to approve of them and to say they're okay and to say they're great. A codependent doesn't necessarily have that solid sense of self and doesn't feel innately worthy. So a narcissist or somebody who has this epic story about themselves and their vision and their project or their religion or their cult or whatever it is, their business that they're attached to, it's the most amazing thing in the world, is going to be really appealing to somebody who is codependent because it gives us this external sense of finding validation and finding our purpose, whereas this can only be found intrinsically. So a codependent may have been raised by a narcissist, and that's very likely, but a codependent might have simply been raised by somebody who didn't know how to take care of themselves. And this parent or parental figure used the child in this circumstance as a sense of emotional support. And in the very most extreme examples of this, the parent is literally talking to the child, unloading, as if they are somehow the therapist to the parent. In more subtle expressions of this, the parent uses the validation of the child, like playtime or interaction time or whatever it is, as that sense of feeling safe and having validity. That may sound a little weird, right? But children do get to an age where they get bored with their parents. And they really want to individuate and interact more with their friends, have a social circle, and their values shift to being mommy, daddy all the time to being, I'm me, I'm doing my thing, and great mommy and daddy are supporting me, but I want to be me now. And when a parent interrupts this and instead is like, oh no, but we need the togetherness of the family, more than we need you exploring yourself and doing what you want to do and finding out who you are, that is also a way that the parents are using the child as a sort of emotional support and stability. And this sets up a codependent who uh, seeks a means of playing a role for others that gives them a sense of self-worth. And often this happened because things were just really, in extreme cases, unsafe. With an alcoholic parent or a parent of this nature, the child at this point is unsafe if the child doesn't agree with the parent, uphold the story of the parent, be there for the parent, and so on and so forth. In other circumstances, the child might be punished if they want to do things that bring them to individuation, to give them a sense of free time and socialization outside of the family, and so on and so forth. So it's unsafe to be who you are, and it's unsafe to think your own thoughts, and you are immensely rewarded for falling into line with the story that the parents or caregivers tell you. That is essentially the foundation of a child who later grows into becoming codependent. And so the adult psychology of this is somebody who doesn't have a clear sense of self and oftentimes in a deep way feels guilty for nothing, feels ashamed of nothing. A codependent doesn't feel that they are good enough. And so the presence of a narcissistic person or a cult-like dynamic is something that is really, really satisfying to the codependent person who is not sure of themselves. So it's important instead to be able to extract yourself from these situations and recognize what you are doing by externalizing your own sense of self-worth. There is so much of the time the story of being a good person in the mind of a codependent person. So they're attached to this notion of what a good person would do and who a good person is. They're attached to feeling validated for their goodness, which they achieve by going out of their way to do things for others. And this can be in the form of gift-giving, favors, or even just giving a narcissistic type of person attention. Because when we give attention to somebody, we're feeding them energy. We're all looking for attention, whether it's conscious or unconscious. We're looking for it because it's a human need. And so by giving attention to this narcissistic figure, we're also externalizing our own sense of self-worth. And so this subconscious underlying shame and guilt in a codependent is the toxic breeding ground for more abuse, because it's when you react to that feeling of shame or guilt that you put yourself in situations where you might be abused. The narcissists or the predators or the manipulators will always use shame and guilt tactics in order to pull you back into the dynamic. So if you have unresolved, unprocessed shame and guilt, then you will be very much vulnerable to those sorts of experiences. And so this isn't something where we snap our fingers and all of a sudden the shame and guilt are gone because we know that it's not right to feel that way. But knowing it's not right to feel that way is crucial. So the positive affirmation of self and the recognizing that you've done nothing wrong, and in the past you've done nothing wrong, and you've essentially done nothing to deserve the abusive behaviors and treatments that have come to you. And then the next step is the continual affirmation of that. It's like we have to make the vibration and the belief in self-validation, self-admiration, self-respect 10 or 20 times stronger than the vibration of shame, guilt, and self-deprecation. And for a while, it's going to be this period of these two different vibrations coexisting within us. And so it's a sort of misunderstanding to say that you have to completely eradicate the bad in order to be any good at all, right? It's like the more that we feed the self-affirmation and the self-love, the less energy is going to be going into the self-deprecation and the shame and guilt. But it takes time to truly and fully, completely uproot it. So in the meantime, in the process, we have to learn, how do we deal with these responses that come up within ourselves? Do we react? Do we go into a freeze mode? Do we shut down our creativity because we're feeling ashamed? Or do we find a safe and stable way of expressing those feelings, of releasing those feelings, of honoring where we're at in our process and moving forward? So it's important in this process that we know the difference between our true allies and those who have these kinds of narcissistic energies. Doesn't mean they're any less of a friend, but they're not really the one that's going to help you get where you want to go in terms of a deep and complete healing process. So the narcissist is always going to give you this feeling of pressure, that you're walking on eggshells, that there's things that can and cannot be said, that there's this unequal division of the attention. You're spending more time on their problems and their stories than you're spending on your own. With somebody who's really balanced and really reciprocal in their energy exchange, that's a person that you know is your true ally and is actually going to be a safe haven for you in your healing process. You know that you're with this person because it feels so naturally that the flow of conversation goes back and forth between your stories and their stories, and you can co-creatively expand. There's always new information coming in. There's always an aliveness. It's fun. It's safe. And they might be like, hey, I love you, you're great, but they're not like the narcissist feeding you this elaborate story of how great you are and how perfect you are and how you're better than the others, and then withdrawing that story and telling you the story of how shit you are as soon as you stop agreeing with them. So I can't stress how importantly it is that when you notice these sorts of things going on, you just have to extract yourself, and then the healing begins. When you stay engaged with the narcissistic person, you're perpetuating the cycle of degrading yourself and losing energy. And the deeper levels of healing really come afterwards. And you'll have to continue to learn how to make these healthy, affirming choices. And this is a process that I've gone through a lot, and I can say that for years, there's been this undoing of the unconscious shame and guilt. It's still ongoing, but it's so much easier and so much gentler than it was before. And in the past, within spiritual communities, I got pulled into so many different kinds of narcissistic individuals, into so many different sorts of projects that I wasn't really meant to be with, because I thought that I would find belonging there. And as I healed, I came back to my essential self and realized that I only needed my own creativity and my own vision to be the best version of myself, and to help the world in a really profound way, and to expand that sense of worthiness, value, love, and deserving that is actually innate. So I hope this has really helped you, and hope that's really helped you see where this comes from, and feedback any questions that you have. Maybe I'll expand upon this in another video. And if you want to go deeper and start to heal these patterns in yourself, I'm available for both coaching sessions, astrology sessions, and channeling sessions, all of which can be a great way to gain deeper self-insight and to change the patterns alive within you. Thanks again for watching this, and like, subscribe, share, all the things. I have an email list too on dantestarshine.com. Blessings, and catch you next time.